Next up is a unique Nordic game conversation with focus on production. It's a live edition of the Learn from the Leaders podcast, and it's led by Patrik Palm, a true Nordic game legend who's been part of the family from the very, very first beginning. So please meet Patrik Palm, game investor, founder and CEO at Favor, Jesper Andersson, head of production at Starbreeze, and Sigurlina Ingvarsdotter, founding partner at Behold Ventures. Welcome.
All right, much welcome to the Learn from Leaders podcast live edition. Normally in this podcast, I interview favorable customers, partners, or just generally very interesting leaders. And today we're doing something quite different. We're going to do this on a stage in front of you. So we combed our hair, and it will probably be feeling slightly different since we are having a conversation just between us with you, watching us. There will be time for some questions in the very end. But with that said, I would like to say I'm super happy to have Lina here from Behold Ventures. If you are a startup, she's one of the smartest investors you could be speaking to. And we have Jesper from Starbreeze Studios. So if you are an established studio and you want to learn that you can teach old dogs new tricks, this is the man to talk to. So with that said, I suggest that we give another round of applause for my fantastic guests at today's podcast. Okay. When I do the podcast, I normally start with a little check-in exercise. Now we're on the stage, but it is what it is. So what I normally do to get into the right, let's say, frequency of the conversation, I do a little breathing exercise. I do 5 conscious breaths. Would you like to join me in that?
Absolutely.
Sure. And in the audience, you are very welcome to join too. So, we breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, and we say ah when we breathe out, ah, in through the nose. We say oh, we breathe out, oh, and in through the nose, and we say whatever we want, we breathe out. Okay. So, in your career in games, what's been the biggest crossroad so far?
Well, that's a great question, and it was when you posted this and sent this to us as something to think about. I mean, I think I've had a few, but as someone who got into games by accident and was having a completely different career, I think the one where I, after a presentation at the venue in the University of Reykjavik, early on in my career, I was 4 years after university. Hilmar, CEO of CCP, was having a presentation about EVE Online and building video games. And at the time, I didn't even know you could have a career making video games. But I was so fascinated that I kind of, raised my hand and went up and spoke to him. And that's how my journey in games started. And then I had a similar moment where I was offered a job actually here in Malmö at Ubisoft Massive in the wake of Nordic Game 2011. Where David Polfeld, then managing director of Massive, offered me a job. And I said to a good friend of mine, well, this seems like too big of an opportunity and I'm not sure I'm ready. I'll say yes next time. And she said, shut up and leave. There might not be a next time. So those are 2 big crossroads where things could have gone very, very differently.
What do you think would have happened if you did not, on that first crossroad, did not speak with Hilmar? What would you have been doing today? What would you have been speaking about on this stage or another stage?
That's a very, very interesting question. Well, I'll have to think about that. Get back to you on that.
All right. Cliffhanger. What about you, Jesper? The biggest crossroad in your game industry career?
Well, I've only been here for 6 years, and I know that many of you and you in the audience have been here for many years, more than that. The thing is, I before this had a real life where I worked in other industries for over 20 years. So I think that is my superpower. That's what I bring to the table. But joining the games industry, I was working at Ghost in Gothenburg, where we were working on Need for Speed Heat. And one of the major turning points in that project was when we were actually, after lots of work, got to the alpha stage and the alpha date, and we had because we had been overscoped for the entire project, and then we still were. And at that point we said, okay, we have all these things that we would like to finalize and do and put into the game, but we can't. So we have to stop now, and whatever is not in the game doesn't make it. That decision was what saved Need for Speed Heat from disaster, I'd say. And that was a crossroad. Had we done what had been done in other projects, just keeping on, we give ourselves 2 more months just to finalize these things that are so important for this game, we would never have shipped at the quality that we did. So and to me, this is also going back to previous industries. Cutting down scope is the best way ever to deal with being overscoped. Adding more time is the second best, and adding more people is the worst thing you can do.
This is a 20-year anniversary. I'm not going to go back 20 years. I would like to go back 10 years. So let me start by comparing notes with you on a thing. So I remember 10 years ago or more, looking at new game studios, so game startups. My impression very often was that it was all about making that game, and they were typically not that interested in production, in leadership questions, etc. It was very much, no, that's corporate. We want to focus on the game. And back then I was running Handsoft, and there was no use trying to tell them, well, you can just have a very simple framework, and it's just going to make your life so much easier. And I remember I watched that that movie In the Game, and it's a scene, where there's like Post-it notes all over the place. There are only 3 people, but they still managed to make an absolute mess out of, how to produce the thing. My impression is that this has changed. That when I meet new studios today, either as a game investor or ones that are picking up Favro to run their planning, they typically want to do 2 things. They want to build that game, but they also have a vision for the company they want to build. What kind of culture do they want to have? What kind of leadership? They actually care about these things much more. It seems to have been a maturity in the industry. So my question is basically, have you observed the same thing? Have you a different perspective?
Absolutely, and I think, there are a few kind of trends that kind of come together for this, and I would actually say that probably 2 years ago, when we started Behold Ventures, we saw more of a focus on kind of culture and values in the pitches than we do today, which I think is perhaps a little bit of a response to the fact that times are tougher right now. At the same time, I joined the startup in California in 2018. That's a startup that is formed by industry veterans. All of the founders come from big AAA companies, have been working the corporate grind for a while. This is at the same time that a lot of the big companies either just have or are about to have these moments of awakening that are kind of a part of the broader Me Too movement, where cultures of big corporations get really called out for toxicity and behavior towards women and other minorities within the companies. So there's a combination of just that grind of the multi-hundred people productions that you see at companies like, whether it's Ubisoft or EA or Blizzard or whomever, like these massive projects. So people want to get back to working in smaller teams in a more humane manner, but they also realize that, and at the same time, what is also happening is that we're realizing that games are a medium that caters to a very broad audience, not to a very small audience. And so there's a call for more diversity in terms of the design of the game itself, but also in the teams that make these games. And I think it's table stakes for founders, particularly the ones that have been a part of these companies, to actually want to work in a place that treats you as a human. And you and I, in preparation for this conversation, we had a conversation about production versus project management in other industries, and your perspective, given that you have for the majority of your career spent it outside of games.
Yeah, 10 years ago I was working on sorting laundry in big industrial laundries, and on a regular basis having laundry owners standing shouting at me. So that was my job back then. Meanwhile, in the games industry at that point, there was a lot of, now talking about production and project management, there was a lot of crunching going on, being inherently over scope and not dealing with that in a good way. So me coming into that industry 2018, I got all those stories told to me. This is how we used to make games. This is how we have destroyed our people, and I was like, this is strange to me, because overtime isn't unheard of. All industries have that from time to time, but crunching is only a concept I've heard of here. And so to me, I was told, okay, crunching is if you order extensive overtime for extended periods of time. That is crunching. And that is not something that is a thing, I'd say, in any other of the industries I've been working in. And when we shipped Need for Speed Heat, which was the first game I was part of making, I was told that, yeah, this might actually be the first AAA game ever that's shipped without crunch. And that, to me, means that we are still an immature business.
So just clinging on a little bit to the question here on the new studio. So how, when you evaluate a new studio, coming to you, do you take this into account? That there's a vision for not only the game to build, but also the team to build. What kind of work processes, what kind of culture, all of these kind of things.
Absolutely, and I mean my background and my partner Koem's background is in running teams, running projects, building cultures, etc., etc. And for me as a producer, it is something that I put a lot of heart, a lot of effort into, and something that I firmly believe in. That the foundation for any great product is a team that is able to thrive while making it. But at the same time, when I look at it, I think about it sort of as a table stakes for a team. Great culture in itself won't create a great product, but it is more likely to be conducive to that. And so, but I also predominantly, we invest in people that we, would like to work with, because at Behold, we're close to our teams. We like to be the first money in. We invest super early in founders we believe in. We believe in them to make great products, but we also believe in them making great companies, great places to work.
So, I'm gonna push you a little bit more on this one. So, do you have kind of like almost like a checklist of they need to have thought about that? There's certain things you want to see in their pitch, the deck, or do you have quite different takes on organization that you could think, okay, they have thought it through. That's the important thing. How do you think around that?
Well, while we don't have a checklist that we follow to the letter, the process by which we talk to the people who are seeking investment from us is roughly always similar. It's always starting to look at the materials that the team shares with us. And already there you can see whether they spend time on explaining, what is important to them as they build the company, or whether it's all about the game. And then, once we meet them, we only meet a fairly small percentage of all the inbound material that we receive. But when we meet them, we talk, we try to get a sense of them as human beings, how they think about building the studio, as well as the product, and then they are exposed to the other people within Behold. So generally, always before we make an investment, the three of us on the investment team have had that conversation, and so there is definitely a rough sort of area that we always go over, and I think the culture and also how they think about kind of what kind of culture will they build and how do they think about their audience, I think are very, very important to us.
How much do you, I want to check, how, hot here goes the bullshit thermometer. How much is it like buzzwords and you feel like this is just words, you don't feel like it's authentic? And or how little of that do you see?
Well, I mean, I think that there's always aspects of there's lots of pitches that we see with buzzwords, and the buzzwords actually change even over a short period, like 2 years. We've seen trends come and go within the pitches from that time. But
what is trending up? What's trending down?
I mean, I think trending down is Web3 NFT significantly. Having trended up, being trending down a little bit is kind of generative AI. Yeah, those are sort of the two big ones. We used to see, I mean, 2 years ago, we used to see metaverse used. We never see that right now. So that's definitely in the very cold area. No, but I think that, you're very quick to assess. I mean, generally, once we've kind of gone through the pitches, it's rare that we've seen a really good pitch that warrants a meeting and then the meeting is a total disappointment. But we are quick to figure out if people know what they're actually talking about when it comes to culture and how they like to lead.
So, final question on this topic. You mentioned something important, which is the aftermath of some of the bad stuff that happened before COVID, and that after it became much more with a culture that's more of an inclusive place, more of a safe space. In one way, that's wanting to get away from something. It's like something that was bad and you want to get away from it, which is a good thing. But when it comes to studios talking about the culture and the leadership they want to build, how much do you see are more focused on, let's say, we can do much more if we have a highly functioning team. And I'll tell you why I'm asking this, because it's interesting to watch startups over a couple of years, because you can have startups that have fantastic teams, all of them, and then some absolutely excel and some don't. And in some of the cases, it's pretty clear that it's a lot to do with the team working well together. And in some cases, like, okay, you had some amazing people, but the team didn't work.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I have had, I've had the experience of working with very different teams in different countries. I worked in Iceland, in Sweden, in Canada, in the US, and on very different products, and the context, the culture context matters. The type of game you're making matters. But I worked on FIFA, and I've said this joke so often it's becoming quite old. But I said, well, if the military would make video games, they would make sports games, because you have to make them, one a year, with super big teams working really quickly with no time for mistakes. And in order to do that, you need a team that's very homogeneous, that thinks very similarly, that's very in tune to get any kind of velocity over the very short period of time that they have for real development. At the same time, what we talk about today a lot is that we need diverse teams. Diverse teams are more creative, they are, they're less likely to suffer for any kind of groupthink, etc. What we don't talk about is the fact it takes a lot longer for a diverse team of people who think very differently to come together and to work as a team. And I think that because often you talk about that, you want a diverse team and you want a flat hierarchy. Flat hierarchy used to be something that many people talked about. I think it comes pretty natural to us people in Scandinavia to work in relatively flat hierarchies. It definitely does not, as an example, in North America. And so I think that I believe very strongly in diverse teams making products that are going to appeal to a broader audience and be more kind of commercially successful. But I also believe that in order to get that diverse team to gel, you need to have a structure that's conducive to that. And you need to be very, very thoughtful to that, because the rest is just chaos without any direction.
I read a research or Harvard Business Review thing that said that supports what you're saying. Diverse teams create better products, but it's harder to make them work well together.
Yep.
So transitioning a little bit to our 10-year kind of look back perspective here. So how when you have a studio that's been around for a while and you do want to make some changes, what is the hardest thing about changing stuff at the studio that's been around for a long time and had success, had ups, had downs?
I think consistency and being, because if you want to make a change and you want to make that stick, you need to sell that to the people that's going to use it and be affected by the change. But I don't think that's actually the hardest. I think the hardest is to be there and handling all the questions and all the problems that come up with the change, and being consistent in, we want to do this anyway, and here's how we do it, and you evolve together. So it's not like you come, okay, here's my sales pitch for this change, this is how we're going to do it, and then we execute. It's like, no, that's the starting point for the change, and we are in this together to make this work well. And if you don't work with changes in the past, you know that you will never end up where you thought you were when you started, because things will evolve. And being there for the team and for working together on things to make sure that we actually deliver together, and we resolve the issues that pop up, we resolve the problems, and we work together. And I think that is also back to the diverse teams and selling this into the company to the outside world. If you are a team and you build a team that work together and you have everyone having that mindset, then you will naturally resolve many of those problems that will occur.
That's a good point with the consistency. I guess sailing would be some kind of metaphor. If you're going to sail through a storm, the option of just kind of letting the sails loose is not a great option. You need to kind of hold on and actually sail through the storm. Is that a good comparison?
I think so.
Is that how it feels?
Yeah, definitely. And so you're surviving the storm, but I would even go further and say, in the aftermath, after the storm, when you pick up all the things that was torn during the storm, and so for a product after launch, picking up the team, picking up the game that just shipped, and continue working on that, even further than not just going through these hard times, but also going through them, and then there's a time afterward that you work together. You continue consistency.
So sailing through these kind of changes isn't unique for the game industry. I mean, a lot of industries go through change, and the reward for the ones who gets through it tends to be pretty big. This kind of constant creative destruction of companies. Some reinvent themselves, come out much stronger, become tomorrow's winners. Some don't. But with that said, my impression is that a lot of change, at least on the production side, with production practices, are changing slower in the game industry than I thought it would. I remember when we started Favor back in 2016, we had a pretty clear vision for, we're like, we figured it out now. We learned so much from all the stuff with Handsoft, so now we know what a great studio would look like. So we're going to build a tool for it. And then we thought, we did not think we were going to be early in the market. We thought we were going to be just in time. And then maybe COVID played in a little bit here. But things are moving slower than at least I thought. So I've been asking people a lot about this, why is this? And I think the best answers I got from people that have experience with different kind of media, both TV and film and games. And the answer I've got, and I want to see if you agree, with this, is that the game industry has this thing that it is a creative, sport, and if you are hired as a creative director, very often it is because you have done a game of a similar size before that has been successful, and now you don't want to mess it up, so you stick to what you know. So there's a little bit of practices get cemented, so to way, they get stuck. Versus if I compare that to where I see in kind of, let's say, more general tech. I know you and I have been talking about development frameworks a lot, and sometimes the lack of it in the game industry. But I would say, coming a bit from the agile community, 10 years ago, what was trending then in terms of development frameworks was different from today. It's been a lot of change, and it's been a little bit kind of stuck, in the game industry. So that's kind of my brain dump on it. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree to the games industry being slow in reaction and immature, as we said before. And I think the reason for that is that this is such an attractive industry to be in. The products are attractive and fun. That's not the case for all industries, I can tell you. It means that people are joining the games industry, and they want to join, which means that when you're recruiting to the games industry, you can just pick and choose. So the talent levels in this industry are extremely high. I've never seen anything like this anywhere else. So these two things mean that people join and then never leave. So the influx of information and learnings from the outside world is very limited. So that's why I think that, for example, when we talk about QA, we still think that QA is done by people playing our games. And now, 25 years ago, when I started working at Saab in Linköping, I was writing the code, and I was delivering the test cases for the code, automated testing. It was built overnight. All the test cases were run overnight. And in the morning, I came in and I can fix the bugs that I had caused. We are very far from that still in this industry. This was 25 years ago. So I think that is, while it's a strength that people stay and don't just leave somewhere else, we should also try as an industry to be more open and learn from other industries. And here, I think that the parallel with the comparison with the film industry might be a bit bad, because in the film industry you're making a movie and that's it, and then if you're lucky 10 years later you can make a sequel, or 5 years later. Here we have long-standing franchises that are decades old, and we treat every product like, now we shipped another Battlefield. What, do we get to make another? That's like a surprise to us. We all know that. So that is, I think that could be a dangerous way of thinking, and because we again building the consistency, the longevity of the games and the teams making them, building these internal communities, making really good things for a long time together, and you can evolve together, and that is something that is I think we could utilize more.
But this is a great opportunity for for leaders that see that opportunity. So let's do a few kind of practical tips here. So one thing I'm happy about is that I've seen that at the game educations, the game schools, now production is taught, and it was not before. So that's a great that's great news for people that are already in. You mentioned inspiration from other industries. How would you coach an upcoming leader within production, leadership, studio management?
So in production, because this is my base, I would first separate between project management and product management, because these are very different skills that you need, and they are rarely combined in the same person. So that's one thing that I do, and then I will learn one of those. I would learn one of those, and being really good at them. But when you've reached a certain level, you've done this for a number of years, I can see, okay, do I actually want to try the other now? But coming in many in many studios, as a producer, you are both the project manager and the product manager. So you're negotiating with yourself a lot of the time, and I'm not sure that it's actually working well for us.
Okay, that's a good point. I want to get back to that one. But do you have a number one book tip? I'm going to ask you the same thing.
As to
number one book tip?
Oh, a book tip.
Yeah,
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And here's why.
Yeah, but you're gonna.
Yeah.
So for production, why?
Yes. So in Lord of the Rings, and we talked about this in a companies at Starbreeze in January. Many people hold Gandalf as the best project manager. I disagree. I think Saruman is the best project manager. I mean, he gets shit done, and he's getting very clear orders from his boss: deliver me an army worthy of Mordor, and then he does. Then, well, sure, he loses the battle, but who was counting on those walking trees anyway? So I think, that's one of the read Lord of the Rings with those glasses on.
I think Saruman is perhaps, I think there are many people in the games industry that might have taken Saruman as a model.
All right, so basically a great producer can be used for good and for bad. All right, I think that's a good
we are agnostic, aren't we?
conclusion.
Yeah.
Do you have any book suggestions for upcoming producers?
No, not specifically, but I do have sort of because I love that you had Lord of the Rings as a book suggestion, because I've read so many of what I like to call airport books that spend 250 pages telling you something that they could have told you in 50 pages.
Yeah.
But so I've gotten quite fed up with those. But I do, one of the books that I read recently, and I've started using science fiction not for entertainment, but to try to sort of extrapolate and see into the future. So I think if my recommendation on top of Lord of the Rings would be a book called Ministry for the Future, because it's a great exploration in kind of our today's biggest problems, but also how to explore within fiction, which I think is great. And I think, once you're not working, I think you need to give your brain a break and recharge and read something that's fun and interesting. So no airport books for me.
Sounds good. And my contribution would be not a book, a podcast which is not my own, but the Building Better Games podcast, I would say is absolutely required for any upcoming and established producer. It's very spot on with a lot of things.
Well, may I ask also, aren't this also interesting for others than just producers?
I think it is, but so one of the topics, there was one topic they have talked a little bit about, and this spoiler alert, I'm going to talk with Ben Karcic, one of the hosts in my podcast about this topic, which is what makes a good producer, and very often what he pushes is the idea that a good producer is not it's not a micromanager of tickets. It's your leadership skills. It's very much around your leadership skills, and what does that mean. So that's one of the ideas being pushed. But we had one podcast which was building upon one of their podcasts, which is the question I'm going to ask now, where we discussed kind of like what went wrong with Agile. And we basically started that kind of podcast with that, 10 years ago, and there was so much enthusiasm around it. But what seems to have happened in the industry is that a lot of the practices were implemented as buzzwords, but not actual. So it almost got a little bit of a bad rep, And I think that's very interesting, taking what you said around the difference between product management and project management, because one of the things that often gets messed up in a lot of organizations when trying to work in an agile way, for example using something like Scrum or Scrumban or Kanban, is that the product owner role gets forgotten or very poorly implemented, and that can very easily steer in a pretty bad direction. But what else? Well, first, do you agree that we kind of Because I remember, back in days doing speeches at conferences like this, and then everyone was just like, yeah, more agile, and now sometimes it's seen as almost as a bad word. Personally, I start to sometimes avoid using the word. I sometimes say, taking agile out of agile, but it's still the same the good practices, but just avoiding a little bit of like how people sometimes get burned with it.
Yeah, I see that as well, and I hear that, and I think this is to a large extent also a game industry thing. And I've been thinking a lot about why this is, because I haven't seen this in other industries. And I think one of the reasons is that a large part of our games is more subjective, is art production and animation, so we are selling emotions, we're selling entertainment, which is actually very few branches of industry that does. So I think that is one of the really big differences between the games industry and many others, if not all. And there, yes, we do need to make and design our processes so you can develop your art and follow the pipelines that you have there in an effective way. And having a stand-up every morning and having a sprint planning and on the Monday, and then on the Friday after you have the sprint review might not fit that well in those pipelines, because you just want to make assets. So acknowledging that and work with that, and in my view, combining several different techniques. I mean, Agile comes from XP at the beginning, which is a set of methodologies, techniques. I mean, if you can pick and choose there. So select select your poison and make make processes that are actually effective and with the teams, and not like imposing it on them, but instead work with them to build and refine them over time. So when I joined Starbreeze in October, so I was going to be there 6 months now, we introduced Scrum because we felt that the way we were working was not really well established, and some call it ad hoc, others call it brute force. So we said, okay, in that case, we'll start with Scrum, and we'll do Scrum, all of us now, so we learn the ropes, and then we start tweaking to our needs. And that's what we're going through now. And again, to the cost consistency, working together with teams and seeing what do we actually need here, and what is helping us and what's not helping us. And what's not helping us, remove it and replace it with something that does.
So how do you think about accountability? And I'll tell you why I ask this. So if you, for example, if you read the biography about Steve Jobs, or if you read, it's going to be two, Walter Isaac. Is it Isaac Walter? Yeah, you know the guy.
Walter Isaacson.
Thank you. Both the biography with Steve Jobs and the one with Elon Musk, it's pretty clear that both of these entrepreneurs have been subscribing to the method of having a specific individual responsible for specific objectives. So that's one way of going. But then on the other hand, you have when you talk about more autonomous teams, you want to have the more flat organization we talked about. It's more of a group responsibility, right? So how do you think around accountability in an organization when these two at least might seem to be a little bit contradicting?
Well, I think a well-functioning small team that has a group accountability can only be well-functioning because individuals within the team have accountability towards each other. Because the team only succeeds if the individuals within it contribute together. And as everyone who's been a part of a group project in kind of high school or university knows, is that there's nothing more demoralizing in a group than individuals who are just coasting and don't contribute. So I think that flat organizations and group accountable, or like well-functioning groups, I think that's the base level. They're well-functioning because the individual relationships are working well. And I think that probably that's because someone within that group has accountability for team dynamics and making sure that when things don't go as planned, that's resolved and cleaned up and not let fester and people kind of ignore that.
And also, I'm more and more thinking, like in Swedish there's only one word for it, ansvar. In English there's accountability and responsibility. And the model, the thought model that I'm using and more is that responsibility is something that you can give someone. Accountability is something that you assume yourself. You can't be given accountability, or you shouldn't. So I'm not sure that's actually correct, but that's the model I'm using. And where I try to establish where I am is that everyone should know, okay, this is what I am accountable for. And if I can't do this right now or ever, then I make sure that someone else is doing it. I can still be accountable, but someone else can be responsible for it happening. So it should all be clear, because otherwise things fall between the cracks. So providing clarity as to what you expect of yourself and others, I think, is key.
I think that's a good ending point here. The conversation around that to create clarity. Equally important in a startup as it is with a much larger studio. With that said, I do want to see if we have any questions. See if we have anyone raising their hand. So, if you can be checking if we have a question, I'm going to fire one more here, which is on hybrid work. And this is a whole session in itself. But I think since we have you on stage, it would be a shame to not address that one. What is your short take on where we're going to land with remote work, hybrid work in, let's say, another 10 years from now, if we're back here again in 10 years and we have a 30-year anniversary?
I think that there's a pendulum there, and before the pandemic, most of us were working in the office. And then we proved during the pandemic that it actually works to work remotely. Or it works at least if you're all doing it. That pendulum swung all the way to that side. Now it's swinging back again. And I think that we are going to see more return to office initiatives being implemented by companies. And I think that will be driven by the notion that if you are to be really effective, you are more so, and you can more work together if you are there. But I do also hope and expect that there will be we're going to be returning to office these days in a week, and these days are being kept at your discretion, because having that ability of balancing your life, but also your work life, and for those days when you are not in the office, you do those things that you can do really well when you can bog down and really concentrate, and those things that you're working on with others, you do when you are in the office. So that is what I hope and see happening so far.
Yeah, I think the interesting perspective here is when COVID happened, I was based in California, and we all went. I was working for a 30-person startup, and everyone went home. And since then, I've been for 4 years in Iceland. And in Iceland, which is granted a small community, there is no question of return to work. Everyone just returned to work, but appreciates the flexibility to be able to work from home, certain, at their discretion, which most people have. So for that community, for some reason, that's not an issue. In Sweden, I hear it's more of an issue, although people have started to go back. In the US, it's a big issue with companies actually having to force people to go back, and big clashes. So I think whether or not the desire of the staff to stay at home probably says something about the underlying work culture in the different nationalities.
My two cents on that will be, if you're going to do a hybrid or remote, design for it, because it has implications on everything from who you hire to how you run your workflows. Designing for one thing but then doing the other, that's never going to be a great thing. With that said, we're going to be around, so any more questions, grab us afterwards. And I would like to thank you so much for participating in this conversation.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Pretty good on time.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we will be back in 10 minutes with next talk. See you then.